Hi guys, welcome to Snakes and Adders. I hope you can see me behind all of these gubbins that I've got on the counter. Message heard loud and clear. Maybe we've not been producing as many educational style videos as we were once. As Paul correctly stated yesterday, in preparation for the new pet licensing rules and the run up to Christmas, we're just absolutely slammed with work. But what I've tried to do is set aside some time this morning. I've got up extra early and done my jobs, so that I can just do a basic run through of thermostats. You'll have seen on the posts that we've made in the past just how seriously we take the use of thermostats in this shop. It's not something we take lightly. We really are committed to making sure every animal that gets sold in here that's in an enclosed tank of any description has a thermostat to control the temperature, to make sure that we can keep the animals to within the parameters that are recommended on the care sheets we find online. And this is a basic introduction to the different kinds of stats, what their application is, and maybe just a basic run through of how we would set them up. So, okay, right, starting at the beginning, the most simple type, they're called mat stats or mini stats. Their maximum wattage capacity is 100 watts. The way that they work is they're an on-off stat, which means that we're at peak power or zero power. There is no in between. So this means their type of control is relatively rudimentary, and it can allow for a certain amount of flux. These tend to be used with the temperate species, corn snakes, king snakes, milk snakes, leopard geckos, crested geckos, etc., where we're not talking about extreme temperatures. And because our animals brumate and go through quite a severe winter, they will handle any sort of temperature fluctuations. And if we say to somebody we recommend a, say, 28 degree, 29 degree basking temperature, we sort of say expect using a mat stat that you might get 31, 32, 26, 27, and it click in between them. And as long as the median is the recommended temperature, that's as close as we're going to get. So I'm not exactly recommending mini stats or mat stats, but they're there, they serve a purpose. They're your entry level stat. Their level of control is basic, but it's better than having no stat at all. The next stat that you could potentially buy would be a pulse proportional thermostat. Now there seems to be some confusion about this and the dimming thermostat and how their applications work. The pulse proportional thermostat is for any non-light emitting heat source. So that would include heat pads, heat cable, ceramic bulbs, tubular heaters, the ceramic trough heaters, what are they called now? The heat panels, the radiant heat panels that you can buy to go on the ceiling, reptile radiators, that's it. So yeah, you can use it with those sorts of products. It's non-light emitting. Usually the pulse proportional stats are available with a day-night function, same as the dimmer stat is, so that you've got round-the-clock control. Where the confusion comes is people seem to think that this overrides the dimmer stat for use with non-light emitting heat sources. The dimmer stat is arguably the most accurate form of stat, and it controls any heat source, regardless of whether it emits light or not. So if you want the most accurate form of control, the most accurate form of control would be a dimmer thermostat. There is an argument from an electrician's perspective that the pulse proportional is more efficient with its power. So if power's of a real premium to you, then potentially a pulse if you're using a non-light emitting heat source, fine. But otherwise, we will always default to dimmer stats. So that's our basic kinds. What we've then got is new digital ranges that are coming out and becoming available on the market. This is called an Oled Dimmer. So this has got a daytime high and a nighttime low, which we program in. In previous incarnations, this thermostat manufacturer Microclimate used a stat called the ME range, which was the magic eye, which is a lux meter that measured the amount of light in the room and made the decision whether it was day or night. That's now been removed because less and less people have got the specialised reptile rooms, and more people are trying to keep them in their living room, and as such it then complicates things when the new big OLED 4K TV comes on and trips your stat back into day mode. So now you set the time. It's got an internal quartz crystal. You set the time, you tell it when it's day, tell it when it's night, tell it what temperature you want it to be during the day, what temperature you want it to be at night, and it will do it for you. But this does not control any UV lights or ancillary lighting systems within the tank, so your T5s and such. This is, oops, break one. This is The Habistat digital dimming thermostat has got day-night function, and this does have a controller for the ancillary lighting. So you could then have input 1 is for your heater, where again we're going to set the time. We're going to tell it what temperature during the day, what temperature at night, when is it day, when is it night, and when it's day it will turn your UV light on, when it's night it will turn it off, and that goes into input 2. So that's the way that this unit works. Exactly the same principle here with the Evo light. This doesn't have the ancillary lighting control, but what this one has is 4 separate temperature controls. So this is the introduction of multi-temperature control. So you've got 4 different set points throughout a 24-hour period. So you could have a midday peak and a middle of the night trough. With a dawn and a dusk temperature as well. So the argument goes that it would be far more naturalistic in application to be able to run a stat like this. Microclimate then also did a thermostat that included the control we've just mentioned with the multi-temperature settings, but also with a secondary output for your ancillary lighting, so you can control your UV from this as well. There are further models on from this, the Evo Pro and the Prime as well, which offer even greater levels of control and being able to manipulate the environment. We find that demand for them is relatively low, and the Evo generally does everything that most of our customers ask for. If they want one of the big posh ones, we can always get those in. But they do, at that upper end, begin to become expensive, and there's no real way around it. From sort of our price range up, we're working from say 25 quid up to, what are you, £90, £94. So that's kind of the price range that you're working to, and obviously with each different incremental change you get a greater level of control within your enclosure. So obviously when we're trying to think about tanks, just bear with me, because I'm just going to move these so I can slide the vivarium into front and centre so we can have a look and go through how we would set this up. So bear with me. Remember, this isn't necessarily about me recommending one style over another. So for everybody who's going to jump on this, be like, oh, well, I wouldn't use a heat pad. Oh, well, I wouldn't use a bulb. Oh, well, I wouldn't use a ceramic. That's fine. You don't have to. There are people out there that do use them. And if they're going to use them, let's try and show them how to use them safely with the application of a stat. So this isn't about necessarily my opinion on what is right or wrong. This is about trying to help people decide how to set their animals up. Okay? Right. Such as a heat pad. This is a laminated heat element, and what we're going to do is make sure that its surface doesn't get too hot. When these are plugged directly into the wall, they get incredibly warm, and there's plenty of pictures knocking about online that show the plastic boxes like the faunariums and starter kit boxes that are just completely melted away, or wooden shelves that have been charred from the fire risk that heat pads present. So it's incredibly important that we have these under control, and these are probably the most innocuous heater that we've got, and people take them for granted. There's a long and storied history of people using these without stats and the problems that that can cause. So this is a sticky back version. So what we do is when the Viv's brand new, we clear away, make sure we've got a nice clean dust and dirt free surface, and we stick the pad down inside the vivarium, run the cable out of the tank. Everyone panics about what if my animal wheezes on it. It's laminated plastic. It's not absorbent. It's a sealed unit. It wouldn't pass British standards if it wasn't, so don't panic. The way that we're going to control it, we're going to use one of our little, where are we, Maxstats, although for some reason Habistat have decided to start building them in the big case now. Must be because they're saving money, I don't know, by doing it. So this is what our controller looks like in its most basic form. On this one we've got a heat light, we've got a power light. Power light will always be on, heat light will click on and click off as appropriate. They always come set to the minimum temperature, so you can then turn it so you know what you're setting your temperature to. We've got 3 cables coming out of the bottom of your stat, and this is pretty much universally true for all of the models. We've got a power plug, that's going to go to the wall. We've got a socket, which is what we're going to plug our heat pad into. And then third and foremost, and potentially the most important, this is our sensor. Okay, so this is going to report back to the box and tell it what the temperature is and tell it whether it needs to turn itself up or down. So what we're going to do is we run the probe inside the tank. The heat pad's now stuck to the floor. We run the probe inside the tank and we're going to tape it to the pad surface. Again, this is a sealed unit where it's not going to get waterlogged. We're fine, and unless your animal is producing 18 litres of pee, I really can't see there being an issue. We never tape over the probe head. We always tape the probe cable and leave the head just slightly loose. What you'll find is that the tape will act as an insulator and give it a false high reading. And what we also need to know is, remember, like in the instructions you'll see that the probes are here, like halfway up the back wall in the middle. This surface is in direct contact with your snake or lizard's belly. Let's remember that. So if this is here and I'm going to set an ambient temperature of 24, 26 degrees in a room that's say 20 degrees, what temperature does the surface of that pad have to get this sensor to register 26 degrees Celsius? This is just a radiant panel here. You're absolutely going to burn your animal's belly to bits. So realistically, if we know that our upper maximum temperature that we want our animals able to access, in the case of say corn snakes, is 30 degrees, we want to know their belly is 30 degrees. We don't want to know that this is here set at 26 and that surface could be in excess of 40, 45 degrees Celsius, trying to get that up to the temperature that we've set. So as we discussed, it's the way that we control this is on or off, and that's rudimentary to say the least. So the next step that we can use would be to use a bulb or a ceramic bulb. So ceramic bulbs are probably, I think, one of the best heaters because of the longevity that they provide, and in a turn value for money. Yeah, they're 25 quid, but they're rated for something like 10,000 hours. Whereas a standard incandescent spot, regardless of manufacturer, if it's just standard gas and non-halogen, it's rated for 1,000 hours. So, you know, when you factor in that they're sort of 5 quid, these are 25 quid, yes, okay, that's an expensive bulb, but when you work it out over the lifetime of the bulb, these suddenly become a better prospect, you know. So what we're going to do is, if you're going to use ceramics, you make sure that you have a heat-rated holder for it. Not something you've ordered off eBay, not a roof-mounted ceramic fitting that mounts directly to your wood. You, again, will be posing yourself a fire risk. You need one of these, bear with me. Which is a 250 watt rated fitting on a bracket that moves the top of the fitting away from the wood. This keeps you safe. This is a fire safe fitting. One that mounts straight to the ceiling, that's 99p on eBay, that's not. And I can guarantee that the CE mark on it is definitely not real. So, how are we going to control that? So we're still going to use this stat just to show you the ways that we would do it. So our heat is going to be at this side. If I put the bulb here, so that is now shining down, it is creating the hot spot. So we're going to have our probe coming through the back. Let me put you through, stay there. Right. We are going to have the sensor at the warm end. It's going to stop about 6 inches off the floor, so hopefully you can see this. And it's going to stop about 6 inches off the floor. So if we say that the probe site is area B, and the basking site, which is directly beneath where the bulb is, so if I put the bulb there, that's point A. We want the distance between point A and point B to be as close as possible. We cannot put the probe directly at point A. Why? Because if the animal lays on top of it, it gives a false reading, makes the thermostat turn up. So we're going to have it mounted on the back wall, as close on to the basking area as possible. The single most important temperature in a tank is the basking area. An animal will die from overheating far quicker than it will die from being too cold. The people that put their sensors down the cold end or in the middle, potentially you're allowing your basking area to become excessively hot, which skews your gradient. So what I'm going to do is just use a tool to explain this a bit further. This tool being a length of wood, right? So, let's assume that our probe's at this side where I've just put it. And I'm going to set my basking area to 30 degrees. What? So this is now our gradient from hot to cold, right? So the animal can move along this to be able to thermoregulate and decide whether it wants to be hot or cold. If we put our sensor at the cool end, and such as the summer that we have just had, we set it at, say, for a corn snake it's 30 to 24. We set this to 24 degrees here, okay? So what we're going to do is our bulb's going to come on, our sensor's now down here, we're going to get the room warming up, which shallows our gradient and then flattens our gradient too early because the sensor's read 24 degrees. So as soon as it reads 24, flattens out. So we never then reach our basking temperature. Now obviously we want to have them in a room that's not going to be getting oodles of direct sunlight, that's going to be able to get superheated by the sun. We're not going to have them in a conservatory. So this comes down to positioning stress of the animal within a home. So what we want is it to be able to, for the stat to do its job and be able to control it. There's only so much a stat can do. If you have them in a south facing, mainly glass room, you're going to get loads of natural sunlight, the greenhouse effect, and it's a toss-up as to whether your stat will actually be able to do its job properly. So consider that. Maybe the installation of blinds and something that will, or maybe a light coloured liner where you can reflect the light back to stop it overheating the room. In equal part, if this is our our vivarium and we're wanting our gradient from hot to cold, but then behind our vivarium we have a radiator for our central heating, we can't have the vivarium next to the radiator, because when the radiator comes on, it creates a flat, hot gradient. There is no cool end because the radiator is behind it, warming it up. So this is what affects us, you see. So even the simple things about positioning and everything else we need to take into consideration. The thermostats can be applied in a multitude of different ways. It's important that you do your research independently. There does seem to be a lot of myths out there about the way that stats are run. I mean, I'll happily listen to other people's counter-arguments about how the positioning of probes goes for them. And there are different ways to skin a cat. So this is not the law according to Chaz or to Paul or to Snakes and Adders. This is the way that we tell our customers to be able to set up our rigs. We want the maximum amount of control. We want point A and point B as close together as possible. So when point A, the basking area, changes, the stat responds very quickly and we're not waiting for it to sense the difference down here. We want to be able to control our gradient. And yes, the gradient may become shallow or deep as summer or winter, depending on what your room temperature is. But remember, if your sensor's at the cool end, all it needs to do is get to here and it completely chops the gradient off, stops it from working. That then affects your ability to digest food, to grow and to thermoregulate correctly. I hope this has been useful. I mean, there's a lot to take in. Do your own research, visit the manufacturers of the stats, visit your local reptile specialist, call in and see us. We'll help you any way that we can. We're committed to trying to drive forward knowledge. Make sure that any heaters that you've got in the tank are guarded so that your animal cannot burn itself. And always, always use a reliable digital thermometer so that you can measure the temperatures at your site and make sure that your gradient is correct. We'll be back soon with another educational video soon. See you later, guys. Cheers.